All right, everybody. We are live for our late night DGen show here for the wrap up of the Incarnate Word game. Thanks everybody for joining us. If you're joining us live, we appreciate it. Good to see everybody at the game. It was a lot of fun. The crowd was packed out. That was a good time. But man, it was an exciting game, and it was nice. Actually, it's kind of fun. I think we, as Jax fans, Zim came out with a column here just before we got on the show saying, kind of putting out there, this year's not going to be that way. This isn't last year's team. It's not going to be that way. And yes, while they are very good and very much a national title contender, in my opinion, some of these games are going to be a struggle. And you had a great tweet today posting about second games of the season, for whatever reason, have just been tightly contested. And honestly, I thought it showed a pretty good wherewithal for this team to just soldier through and end up pulling ahead. In what I really liked the description Sam Herder used in calling it a clunky game. Like, the officials were very involved. Some of it they had to be, some of it they didn't have to be. I don't think it was necessarily favorable either way. There were some really bad calls against Incarnate Words. There were some really soft calls the other way. It was just messy. It was clunky. It didn't really feel like either team was really firing on all cylinders. But hats off to Calzada. That guy's a dude. Their skill players were dudes. I mean, some of the catches they were making when they were getting whacked, I mean, they were getting hammered when the ball got there, and they just did not drop a one. Really impressive. I know on the one drive down the field with the soft PI that they ended up converting into a touchdown, the catch before that play where the guy, God, it looked like he jumped off a pogo stick up there, snatched it out of the air, got hammered, lands on his head, and hangs on to it anyways. I mean, that was a hell of a play. The Jacks right now, and Coach Rogers pointed out in his post-game show or post-game interview that, hey, we're kind of struggling a little bit tackling in space on these shifty, really fast receivers. I don't know if there's a lot of that level of skill player talent in the Valley. I don't think you're not getting that when you're playing NDSU. When you're playing the heavy hitters, you might have one guy like that. The guy for the Yotes, that guy's a real quick, shifty guy.
Steph Logan's kid.
But
they
got a feed across the board.
Yeah, we'll hit USD. That was an interesting game. They got a couple guys that in the past they kind of profiled a little more like that, but I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, we'll get there certainly. Should probably plug the sponsors before we go much further.
Oh, good call. Yes, we should. Of course, our title sponsor. I'm so used to doing the show without it. It's weird having it this year.
Like I said, we're not. We built this on not being formal. So
right. So, of course, we are very appreciative of our title sponsor, Kubota Dealers of South Dakota. You hear us talk about them every show for Jackrabbit Illustrated. See it on every blog post and the website. But Kubota Dealers of South Dakota, there's 10 different locations across the state of South Dakota with a couple right over the border as well. Get yourself into some Orange equipment. They do sales, parts, service. They do the whole 9 yards there. I don't think you'll see service very often because there are some awesome machines. I know everyone I know who has one has not had any issues with them. Granted, those are all a couple of years old, but still pretty impressive machines. Get yourself into some Orange equipment for anywhere just around the house, around an acreage, around a farm. They've got the equipment you may need. And of course, our show sponsor is Cubby Sports Bar and Grill in downtown Brookings. I know Matt went there and forgot his card after he left and had to go back. And then Chad got there and it was just crazy busy. So that's awesome to hear. Best place to go before the game, or before tailgating, in my opinion. I wouldn't go before the game because of tailgating, and after the game, if you're sticking around, go and have a drink at down Cubby Sports Bar and Grill. They've got all the action on every TV you could want. And if the Jacks are on the road, they will have your Jacks games there. So get down to Cubby Sports Bar and Grill in downtown Brookings. But yeah, beyond that, I don't know what you saw. You probably saw more than me, maybe better than me, because it was our daughter's first game. So that was a little bit of an adventure. So you're not really locked in on every play. I'm looking forward to the rewatch. But I was able to watch fairly close. But I'm curious what you thought about the game overall watching.
Well, always a little interesting being on the sidelines, so I don't quite have the eye in the sky. So I'll be kind of curious what some of those things look like up top. Yeah, I haven't read Zimmer's column yet either, but obviously very. You definitely do get that sense of this being a very different season. But like I said, we've had this weird thing where the last 2 years, even though those teams ended up being incredibly dominant by year's end, the second games of the season were very close. Although, as somebody pointed me out to me on Twitter, well, this game ended up being a blowout at the end. Well, the score obviously didn't quite reflect that. They pulled away at the end. Which I think was actually, I saw a couple predictions that was how that was going to be. No, I think it was, I think this was kind of what some people kind of expected. I think we kind of teased this a week ago. And that was another tweet I put out there, was that I thought 2 years ago this would have been the tougher championship game matchup for SDSU if it had been Incarnate Word as opposed to North Dakota State, because they just run a scheme that you don't see. Their tempo, as much as I thought, that was what really struck me, was, and it's why I think maybe you have a few concerns right now with the secondary, because they've struggled a bit with the passing and some of the short and intermediate stuff. They're very good against the run, although I don't think Incarnate Word really wants to run the football very much. They kind of use some of the screen passes that, I think some of that's short, and the screen stuff kind of works as much for their running game. But, I don't know how much to judge the passing game struggles right now, because the tempo they ran faster than Oklahoma. I mean, it was like, I feel like I was watching a basketball team run a fast break at times. I couldn't.
They were so fast that the crowd wasn't even keeping up with trying to get noise until later, when everybody kind of adjusted a little bit, and then they started having issues from the noise too. But yeah, there was a while there where I'm looking around going, I don't think anybody realizes they're back up on the ball.
Yeah, I mean, that was incredible tempo, and that's kind of what they've always been, that I recall. I think they've been through I think, if I'm not, maybe I'm wrong on this, somebody will have to correct me. I know we have a fan in here, I think, from Incarnate Word. I think they changed coaches right after they lost that semifinal game in Fargo, where they almost won. I mean, I think they've always kind of had this style. So, I mean, that's part of where I'm not sure. Okay, how much do we judge? Do you hit the panic button? Oh, yeah, you don't hit a panic button in week 2, but how much of this is like, okay, there's a problem here, or is it just, man, they face these really too high tempo? And this is something I kind of liked. Jimmy didn't really address it too much, but I kind of like this non-conference, because you're seeing different styles that you don't normally see throughout the Valley. You saw it with Oklahoma State. I mean, I know everybody's kind of dismissing maybe Southeast Louisiana, but they've been a playoff team before. You're gonna have to go down in the swamp, essentially, in the heat. We'll see what that's like in a few weeks. But you're seeing different styles of play that I think that might be helpful once you hit the playoffs, because you never know what you're going to see at that point. So and as I've said, as we've seen with these second games of the year, unless you're a guy from the Baltimore Ravens, Isaiah Likely, and you don't believe teams are going to get better throughout the season, I do believe South Dakota State will probably improve, because they've shown historically they do improve. I mean, I think that's maybe the one other concern, is they're not getting a ton of pressure on the quarterback right now, but they don't get a ton of pressure historically on the quarterback at the early part of the season. Kind of comes along as the thing goes along. So, I think offensively, boy, I really like where they're at right now. Again, I think that's also a little deceiving too, because as much as I think as good as they were offensively, I don't know where Incarnate Word is at right now defensively. They hit hard, but I would say maybe they're a little behind where they were 2 years ago. I had somebody online saying they think maybe this team is better than 2 years ago. I'm not willing to go. It's so early yet. I'm not willing. They should be back in the playoffs. I know they missed it last year. I think they had I know the Southland was kind of down, and I think they had a Division II team. some Division II non-counters. If they're not back in the playoffs, then something will have gone catastrophically wrong. But yeah, I think it was pretty easy. I mean, and they hurt themselves too with some really bad penalties. I think that's maybe the other thing if you're Incarnate Word that otherwise I think they called a pretty good game. I think the one mistake that they probably are really shooting themselves for right now was that 4th and 1 call in the final minute of the first half. You haven't run the ball well all day. SDSU is really good against the run, and they try that quarterback power play. Just keep throwing the ball or that's been your strength the whole game. I'm sure. I think his name's Kenny, right? The coach.
Yep.
I think that's the one he's kicked because you knew at this point it's kind of a shootout, and your defense really isn't stopping them a whole lot. I mean, SDSU's they've missed a field goal. They had one where they dropped a ball or they've been a little off. You kind of know you need to go score for score. Plus, you're going to get the second half kickoff. So if you tie the game, if you can get in the end zone or even kick a field goal, you can maybe take the lead when you get the second half. And of course, they went right down and scored to start the second half. So I thought that was probably the biggest tactical error they made in the game was with that 4th and short. They tried to do something that hadn't worked the whole game and kind of got away from what was working. But otherwise, aside from the kind of some of the penalties and the loss of composure at times, I thought they played a pretty good game. But I think defensively, they just, at least for the Valley, I don't know how they're going to hold, South Dakota State kind of had their way a little bit. They were able to, I think just about every drive outside of the first 1 or 2 ended with touchdowns. So they got to get a little better defensively. But yeah, I think that's a very good team that should hopefully make some noise in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think they're going to dominate the Southland Conference for sure. And if you look at that team, I think it's good. I really like seeing good programs from outside the Midwest like this a little bit because it does serve as a little bit of a reminder. Hey, there's other good teams outside of the Big Sky in the MVFC, and just because they are high flying offense, they did almost do the same thing. Granted, different team, all that stuff, but same program. Almost was who SDSU faced in the title game, the national title game. They were really chippy. they were really chatty.
I think the coach needs to stop throwing his headset. That's the one that I think he threw the headset about 2 or 3 times. I feel for the poor headset. If that thing still works at the end of this, when he goes back to San Antonio, I'll be a little shocked. But yeah, that was Yeah, it was, and I wonder if maybe that's the way they always play. I'll let Andrew Markham in the chat say that, but they might have just been that hyped. Obviously this is a huge game for that program to come up and play the two-time defending champs. Maybe it was just, there was a lot of chat going on. I was on that sideline, and you could tell it was pretty. That might be the way they play all the time. Yeah, but yeah, I think that. Yeah, and right, Jordan Fink, there's a lot of, the quarterback was a Texas A&M guy. He beat Alabama. He was the starter when they beat Alabama a few years ago. So, that's kind of been their way. Obviously they had Cam Ward a few years ago who's lighting it up in the FBS, and Lindsey Scott. They're I think the number I heard was they only have 10 true freshmen on their team right now. So it's and sometimes that, they seem to have found the right balance there because there are some programs which can – They don't, that portal thing does not. We kind of saw what happened with Colorado tonight at the FBS level, but there are some programs which don't mesh the portal well. I think this one's kind of found a good balance with it. There are others that don't, but they've seemed to have had a pretty good mesh. And like I said, last year for them to lose 2 games and not make the playoffs is a little surprising because we've seen teams with, even though like I said, I don't remember the full thing. I think there was a division. Maybe they just didn't have too many counters on their resume, but I've seen teams with worse resumes get into the playoffs. But yeah, I think they'll be nonetheless, very good athletes. And I think again with them, you just need to, they're not going to play. They're never going to have, I think, a number 1 ranked type defense like what we've seen in the Valley. But with that offense, I think it's just, try and get a couple stops try and get a couple turnovers, and then then you just, I mean, it's almost like a shootout. It's almost like a basketball game, like a fast break at that point. And they got NDSU into that game a couple of years ago, and if not for a couple questionable calls, they would have been in Frisco against the Jackrabbits.
Yeah, no, like you mentioned the transfer thing. You could tell they're not just pulling in dudes because they're coming from an FBS. Like all those dudes could play. Like they could all play. They had a good solid team across the board, really. I do think they had a chip on their shoulder, like Andrew's saying. They wanted to show they belong, and that was some of the extra motivation. But just to be a little extra chippy, try to get SDSU off their game, maybe a little bit.
There was I've got to find this too. There was one other one where they had I tweeted this because I'm like, they challenged a play where the ball clearly bounced, and I'm like, guys, I think the coach's dad. I'm like, I've got to find this to find the video for the guy. I think a fan responded back. I'm like, I was on the field right behind it. I'm like, the ball bounced, and like the players are like, no, he caught. I'm like, okay, coach, I know you guys are hyped up. I know you want to believe in your guys here, but you don't want to waste a timeout on that. Come on, that's like that. So I mean, like I said, there was some. I just think some of that was just how hyped up they were, and like you said, they're playing with that chip on their shoulder. I think if they were to play again in a playoff game in a few months, maybe you wouldn't see that level of just that level of maybe. I think some of that would be gone. You'd hope. I think, but so I think some of that was uncharacteristic. I'm willing. I've been in situations. We've been in rivalry games where we've seen stuff like that happen, and I think you can kind of say, okay, that's from the rivalry. I think this was a little more just team came in here maybe a little too hot and things kind of boiled over. I think you saw SDSU, and of course you're on the road too. So when you're on the road, you're probably going to not get a few of those calls if you are on the border. So, but otherwise very impressed with I think what they brought to town. And I wouldn't want to, if this game were in San, I don't know if they have a return game scheduled. I haven't had a chance to ask that. But
one-off, I believe.
I did think it was a one-off. Yeah, that was, remember we had that in the chat a year ago because they just scheduled it last year, I think. I mean, that'd be a dangerous one to go play down in San Antonio. I'm telling you that. I mean, I know they only have I think I was here as I was driving back to Sioux Falls to do the show, I think I heard they only had 2,000 people in attendance. I mean, obviously, San Antonio, there's a little more to do. There's a few more football options in the state of Texas than South Dakota, and they're a little closer packed. So, but that would have been that's a dangerous one if you have to go down if State ever had to go down there. I mean, you talk about that offense and potentially the Texas Heat. I mean, that would be an interesting game if you had to play, especially. I mean, maybe play them at night, but if you had to play them in the middle of the day in September, that would be a scorcher.
Yeah, especially with that up-tempo offense they run and how they keep you humming and keep you on the field. You can definitely tell they want to negate the advantage of being able to rotate the defensive line through and everything. I do think just naturally that style of offense makes it difficult to have really tough as nails defense, or maybe makes the defense look worse than it maybe is, because there was times before SDSU really started winning titles, when the offense was a little higher flying, that the defense would get a little bit wore out. Just you scored so fast, and now they're back right back on the field. And you time of possession, SDSU ended up with 35 minutes. I remember Tyler saying on the broadcast. So that's a healthy chunk of game for having possession of the ball. I did like that SDSU started to be able to get some pressure. It was a lot, there was blitzes and stuff like that making it happen, but they did figure out a way to get pressure. I think they did get burned on that tunnel screen that they housed for 69 yards. I think that was partially due to because there was a blitz, because there was nobody there that when you have an offensive lineman running free looking for somebody to hit and there's nobody to hit, then yeah, you were pretty committed up on the front and got burned. And some of that could have been with the fake that was on it and everything else, but that stuff can burn you, but it did make a difference and help, I think. And I think both teams are going to have things that they're going to look back on this game and go, man, if we'd done this, if Graham Gorin catches that pass that hits him right in the chest for that pretty much automatic touchdown, the first drive of the game, how does that change things?
I got to look at that again. I think that was also a little, I don't think Mark quite put it on the money. I've also got my editor up here with me and I've got the highlights. Because I thought when I saw it initially, it was a little behind him too. I mean, it was, it was a ball he should have probably caught, but I think Mark would probably say he probably should have put it a little bit. He could have put it in a little bit better spot, So I mean, yeah, I think, but that's kind of at the same time, it's I think one of the things we talk about when I say that they've had these, like, it must be something about the second game. Well, the something is it's the second game. I mean, nobody plays, it's early in the season. Teams are going to struggle. I mean, a lot of the time your first game might have been against a Division II team or, certainly which was the case for SDSU last year. So you played a Division II team or a Pioneer League team or something like that, you kind of had a layup. And in that case, you're just, you kind of went through the motions. So as it was with Montana State last year, that was really SDSU's first game, and kind of vice versa. I think last year, Montana State opened with Utah Tech or something like that. So that was their first game, and both those teams, as great as that game was, they both felt like, man, we left a lot out there. So, and then the other instance that you usually get is if it's not a Division II or a Pioneer League team, it's probably an FBS game. What happened 2 years ago, SDSU got beat the heck up at Iowa. They were injured, and, that was a sloppy game they played the following week against UC Davis when they nearly blew they looked like they had it, and they kind of blew it in the last minute or two and took them stopping a 2-point conversion, I think, in the final play or two. So, I mean, sometimes you've had that FBS game and you're beat up, or you've just lost and you've just faced a higher division team. And especially in SDSU's case, you faced power conference teams, teams that were maybe even ranked or close to being ranked. So, I mean, it's kind of tough to come down from that in a sense. So, I mean, it's still so early in the season that you just can't. It's tough at this program because they have such a high expectation, but you can't expect them to be mid-season, postseason form in game number 2 when they're like I said, when it's just game number 2. And certainly these aren't layups they're playing either. I mean, the last 3 years you're talking about a team that was today ranked 12th, a team that was ranked 3rd, 4th, 2nd year ago. I can't remember what Montana State was, but they were top 3, top 4. And then I think Davis was ranked a couple years ago. So it's not like they're, going into game 2 and playing you think they would be playing a Division II team or a Pioneer League team. They're playing a ranked team right after, in 2 of those cases, playing a power conference FBS team. And, what had been pretty physical power. I mean, Oklahoma State, I know, obviously, I think Jackrabbit fans probably pretty happy today they didn't crap the bed, and because they were crapping the bed in the first half against Arkansas. They, I would have felt pretty, because I was talking them up as I was trying to defend them to some of the Fargo people who were saying, "Oh, whatever, you guys are stepping back." I'm like, this team's going to win at least 9 games, and then they're looking like butt against Arkansas. But yeah, so I mean. Again, a lot of this thing is just, I know, Brian, next week's Division II, but either way, I mean, usually you start either with an FBS team or you get a layup or Division II or a Pioneer League team. And it's, so, I mean, yeah, it's week 2. These early season games, these non-conference games, you just can't, I don't think you can expect a team to be firing out of the gate. And sometimes the team that comes firing out of the gate that's not always the best thing, because usually sometimes that team ends up fall. I mean, how many times has Northern Iowa beaten Iowa State and then fallen off a cliff the rest of the way? So, I think back a couple of years, the 2 times SDSU has won an FBS game. Granted, they were against bad teams in CSU and Kansas. They never really got their mojo back the rest of the year. They kind of underachieved those seasons. So, take that for what it's worth. You have to the early season is still you're kind of figuring out who you are a little bit.
Yeah, and you gotta the way SDSU's run over the last while now, and particularly the last 2 seasons, and you can look up north the way those teams have run up there. They just continually get better and better and better and better and build until once you hit that last, and you're hitting the playoffs, you're going, man, how was that? How did that end up like that? How was that score that close? It always seems to happen that way. When these teams are as line centric as they are and controlling the line of scrimmage and everything, I think that has a lot to do with it. And you could really, I think even just in the second half, you really saw they started to click a little more on offense and on defense. I think those stops when Incarnate Word was really in field goal position, those stops were a big deal on 4th down. That was obviously huge in the game when it was a 1 possession game for quite a bit of the game. And it was funny because the Jacks went and kicked a field goal on 4th and 4 at one point in the game, and had a row of high school kids sitting next to me, and they go, "What? Why are you kicking there? Go for it. Why are you kicking there?" And then, sure enough, pretty similar situation. UIW's going for it instead of kicking. And I get it. I'm not knocking the decision, because you're on the road. You're at the number 1 team's house. You got to get 7. You're not going to win with 3. So you're going out to win the game. And I absolutely get it. But I turned on and looked at him and I said, that is why you take the 3 points. If you feel you have a defense that's going to hold up for you, which was very difficult. I mean, good Lord, Calzada was 31 of 39. It was wild, but then the Jacks put up 551 yards, I think. It was a shootout, kind of what I was concerned with going against UIW here.
Yep, I got those numbers right now, and I'm also seeing why the Aaron Best should be fired, for those who are wondering.
Oh, yeah.
Eastern Washington lost in overtime to Drake. That's not the only Pioneer League team to beat a scholarship team today. Murray State, I think that was final too. Murray State, we know they've got some. I had some hopes for Murray State, but obviously they're still kind of rebuilding. But yeah, Sacramento State, yeah, but Murray State, we know, has had a lot of issues. They're really trying to rebuild. I mean, Eastern Washington, good Lord, that's been. I feel for that program, because they were. God, you think about how great they were for so many years, and they were in the title game 5 years ago. I mean, they actually kind of gave NDSU a decent game. That was the Trey Lance 2019 team. They gave them I don't know that I really thought they were going to win, but it's like they didn't get blown away. I think they were actually decently in that game for a while, and it was. Yeah, well, we can hit on that, because it was a pretty good day for a former Jackrabbit in that conference that I don't mind seeing. Yeah, Mr. Eck. But yeah, some of the numbers in this one. Yeah, Calzada, 31 of 39, 351, 3 touchdowns. I was about to tweet back to somebody. I'm glad I didn't send this. I'm like, and I still don't know that I'm going to put him in that, because I mean, this is the company this guy is in when you go to that school, even though they haven't been around that long, at least as an FCS. Yeah, I'm like, I still don't know that I want to put him in the Cam Ward and the Lindsey Scott discussion, because those guys were so good. But man, right after I was about to hit send on it, and then this guy just started blowing up, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to hit send on that, because I'm like, but man, he really was good. I mean, I don't know that he's quite the runner that Ward and Scott were, but man, he was just. Although he did end up with 43 yards rushing, so like I said, threw a very good ball, and some of those receivers. different kind of receivers than obviously what we saw at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State had the big physical guys. A lot of these guys were just the one guy who got cartwheeled. I'm going to have to pull that video up and show it later. That was one of the best catches I think I've ever seen. But, credit Mark Gronowski too, and not quite as a 21 of 32, 4 touchdowns. The one pick was just kind of and that thing worked fine because that ended up being basically a punt. It was as good as a punt basically because it was a 3rd down play and they pinned him back at the 1. And I was right in that end zone. I kind of thought they got a safety at the end of the half. I was a little disappointed and surprised Jimmy didn't try to call a timeout and get one and try and see if they could just bring the house and because they were, obviously, I don't know, we'll see. Obviously the way they pass, because then of course they hit some big pass plays. But yeah, Amar Johnson runs for $112, and I'm just gonna keep saying this because I've been wrong before, and I'll be wrong again. I'll probably be wrong a lot, 99% of the time, but I'm not wrong about this. Griffin Wilde's gonna play in the NFL. Just get used to it. I'm gonna say that for about another 2. Hopefully he plays all the next 2 years at SDSU. I'm just knock on. I think this desk is wood. Knock on wood. 10 catches, 106, 2 touchdowns. The guy is gonna. If he does not, or he's gonna get at least a camp shot. That guy is gonna. He. Oh man. I think the best thing that's gonna keep him probably here is that he grew up here. From my understanding, he grew up with Jackrabbit flags on his bedroom wall and all that. So, you've got the hometown, you get the hometown discount, so to speak, on that one. And that's, I've said that a few times. I've heard that a few times just kind of in passing that, maybe it's one thing that'll help SDSU that maybe hurts NDSU a little more. The Bison go a little more, they obviously don't have as many North Dakota kids to recruit from because there's just not that much Division I talent in the state, but they tend to. I remember the mini controversy a few years ago when Stig talked about how they get their $2 million plane and they fly all over the place on a radio interview once. And ironically, I think that's kind of hurt them a little bit because they recruit so many guys from Florida and all these other places that, well, yeah, when they have success, they're going to want to bolt. Who's going to want to stay in Fargo very long if you're from Florida or Arizona or wherever? But you get all these South Dakota guys, they're probably going to want to stay here if they're still doing well. So, yeah, Wilde is just, he's got the size. He's only going to get better. He's going to keep getting better.
He's only sophomore.
Gore, yeah, sophomore. And, didn't redshirt, so he's true sophomore. I think this is the first. They did say one of the Yankees had a 10-catch game down at I think it was Youngstown last year. So, we'll see. Like I said, the SDSU. I don't doubt that someday SDSU is going to have some more transfers, but I think they've got a chance to mitigate it a little bit better, just because it's, But we'll see. These things are, it's a different world. But Goring has had it. We know we had the one drop, but a very nice catch in the end zone again later on. We're starting to see the tight end. It was right around the time Gannon caught, like, when are we going to see these damn tight ends? Because it was like,
yeah.
Now, was Stoffel hurt today? I hadn't heard about that because I didn't really see him.
I think he might have went off early, actually, if I remember right. I think he might have went off early, banged up. Not sure what that was, or he just didn't play. Like I said, I was a little in and out, but man, the speed on who was it that almost housed the screen pass, the tight end that
I think it was Gormley.
I was watching that going, as he's running down the sidelines, it looks like a corner's trying to catch him and can't. I'm like, that is speed for a tight end. Holy hell.
Because we've been hearing, obviously Jimmy really talked up the tight ends. I've heard a lot of things about how great. I've heard a lot of things about how good this room is, but they're still very young. And they had some mistakes. Obviously, certainly there was the one. mean, obviously a lot of it was made of that fourth down route in the right on that opening drive last week at Oklahoma State. Although the guy just tripped. I don't know if there was any mistake there. He just tripped over his own feet, or he tripped over somebody else's feet. So I don't know how much that really is a mistake on his part or a freshman mistake. But I was starting to think, I'm like, okay, because I think that's going to be, of course, there were a lot of guys from last year's team who were on the sideline. I mean, I saw the Yankees, Zach Hines, Dyshawn. Felt bad because Dyshawn Gales was walking in behind me and I couldn't remember his name for the life. I'm like, I know it starts with a D, I just can't remember. And then it was Savion Williams. So I'm like, God. And then, of course, right after I got it, I'm like, damn it, it's Dyshawn Gales. And then I saw him later. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. I swear to God, I didn't have to look up the roster. But yeah, I saw Zach Hines, and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, these receivers they have are great. You got the two bookends you really like with Goring and Wildy, and I think they've got some other guys who eventually. I know Prejean, I think, had a drop. They've got some other guys. I think. I mean, even Jack Smith, I know, was actually backup. The true freshman was I think he was listed second on the depth chart. Now he could end up playing 4 games and still keep his red shirt because that's the rule. So I don't know that that's a big deal or not. We'll see. But I kept thinking, though, it's like, they're going to need some of these tight ends because tight ends are always kind of your security blanket. They're your big target. Granted, Wildy's a big guy, but it's a different kind of size when it's a tight end. I'm like, aside from the fact these guys have been we've been hearing how good this tight end room is, and you want to see it's like you just need those big targets when you're getting closer or in the red zone, and I did struggle a little bit in the red zone today. I mean, that was a bit of a struggle at the start. So certainly,
I wonder with the tight ends, they've got so many of them that they've been working on, going through picking. There's so many that have different skill sets that they're talking about and all this stuff. They want to use all these guys. I wonder if Mark's still developing chemistry, trust with those guys a little bit, because it was interesting to me. As soon as he hit that touchdown to Gormley, and all of a sudden the next drive out, bang, he hits him on an out route on the sidelines, and it felt like, all right, I'm comfortable throwing to you. And then the one interception that he underthrew, I believe it was going to him again, where I think some of that, unlike the receivers where it was pretty clear it was Wildy, then Goring. Too many G's, but that it was easier probably to build up some chemistry there as you're going, instead of a position that isn't in flux, but it was, in competition for who was going to be the guy, who is going to be the guy. And I think we just haven't seen that trust and everything emerge yet, just because, like you said, that's your safety blanket. You got to have a lot of trust in your safety blanket. So I think some of that's being built.
Thanks, Andrew. I see Andrew Markham said he's checking out, so thanks for hopping on. And yeah, good commentary there, sir. Good to get a perspective on UIW.
I'll listen to the next
word
FCS triumvirate that comes out, or read the articles when they come out next year.
Like I said, it's one of those things. I'm impressed with the rise, because I do remember one of the things about Incarnate Word that was kind of impressive to me was when I think it might have been NDSU's first appearance on College Game Day. They were the kind of the sacrificial team that was in Fargo for that game. And it was like, I think it was maybe their first or second year in the FCS. And, of course, Game Day didn't give a crap about that game. They were just there for NDSU because I think it was right after they'd beaten Kansas State. And I just remember, and Bison, just like today, the Bison beat them. It's one of their it's like when SDSU plays someone like Drake or something. That's what you thought of it at the time. But for them they got really good, really quick after that. Like it's been a pretty quick rise, and obviously they've used the transfers and now the portal. But yeah, I mean that was a quick to go from being just kind of this afterthought of game day, and they're gonna, you're like, oh man, they're gonna take their lumps for a while, to like, oh man, this is a pretty fun program. It's, and they're a team that was, then they go back to Fargo a few years later, and I still to this day, I don't know that they shouldn't have beaten the Bison that day. I think I don't remember the exact circumstances, but I think there were some interesting calls. You get some calls when you're in the Fargo Dome. I'll put it like that. We all know that. I think even Bison fans don't disagree, but I'm sure you have a good home field advantage, you're going to get calls. SDSU fans, you get calls now because you have a good home field advantage when you put 19,000 people screaming their lungs out. So that's the perks of that when you have a good home field advantage. But yeah, it's an impressive program I think they put together in really I say it like it's a short amount of time. It's been about a decade now, but more than a decade. But yeah, I think tonight was a good prove it moment for them especially after, like Andrew had said, maybe some people didn't think they should be ranked. Certainly some adversity last year of missing the playoffs when people kind of said, hey, you guys didn't deserve it. Okay, well, now that's a bit of a thing there. So bow and arrow or SDSU. Hey, we'll see. Or you don't use or you don't bring in the legendary or you don't bring in the legendary Cole Payton package and then the pick. That might have been bigger than the bow and arrow.
I will always maintain that I think what happened there wasn't the bow and arrow, but from what I remember seeing in the video was the ref looks over, if we're just talking about that play, and he saw this, didn't see the bow part, just saw this and thought it was a throat slash instead of a bow and arrow and threw a flag for that. That's what because bow and arrows happen all the time and nobody called. I mean, the Yankees we were just screaming on the pod like, guys, please stop. We just saw NDSU get dinged against us and it'd be a huge play in the game. And then they kept doing it and it's like, oh my God. But it worked out. Obviously it was fine.
I do want to move on because I know I do want to have one more quick thought about this game before we move on because obviously there were some other big games. I certainly mentioned Montana. We obviously know USD. But there was one thing because I did kind of touch on that Cole Payton thing, and we saw a lot more of this today, and I'm curious to see how it's going to evolve. We saw a lot more of Chase Mason, and he was a lot more active, doing a lot of different stuff, and I really like where they're doing. I know it had mixed results, but I like where they're heading with this. I like the experimentation. They're going, to be in fairness in conversation. Where I've criticized NDSU with this is I think the Cole Payton project, where that fails is he comes in and nobody takes it. A good team, not, obviously when he runs into the bad teams, they can do whatever they want because they're going to run through them. Where a good team or a team with capable linemen dissects that is they know he's not going to pass or they don't take it seriously. So on the same front, SDSU is going to have to, make Mason a passer too. You're going to have to respect the fact that Chase can throw. And I saw some instances in there where they were going to make him pass. And I that's what I liked out of this thing. I mean, there was like, somebody was asking me to describe that. And like, there was I think the second time they brought Mason in, he was in the shotgun with Grinnell. I'm like, okay, which one of them's taking the snap here? They tried, I think, a reverse. They tried to pass with him once or twice. I mean, he caught a pass. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this develops, especially since obviously we know we're going to be comparing them to NDSU because that's where you kind of figure that's going to be one of the conference title races, if not the national title races. But it's going to be interesting to compare that how they use Mason, how they use Payton. And I really like it. May work sometimes, it may not, but it seems like they're thinking about using him in all these different ways. And I like that we started to see that a little more because he's got to be, if you're going to do it, you can't just have him be running all the time. He's got to be multiple or nobody buys it. Because I remember they kind of did the same thing with Rudy Voss once upon a time. They had the Rudy Voss package. And yeah, he would occasionally run for touchdowns, but you knew when he was coming in, he was just going to run the football. I mean, sooner or later, it's the same thing with Cole Payton. Sooner or later, the guy has to show the other dimension or everybody or a good team is going to just load the box up and say, okay, fine, pass the ball. We dare you at that point. So I I'm really excited to see what they're going to do with this because I got a little. Ryan's not going to, I think, ever be as boisterous as Jason Eck. Although I think I'm not. I don't want to get in trouble with it. I think he feels like he would fare well if he had to fight either Jason Eck or Zach Lujan if he ever came down to that. That's just my gut feeling. But hope I don't get in trouble for that. But I think there's a little bit of Jason Eck creativity in there with what I saw potentially moving forward. So that's one of the other things that really excited me out of this is just where are they going to go with that? Because I think that could lead to some fun possibilities down the road.
Yeah, they're very creative with them, which I do like. I still have mixed feelings on bringing in a second quarterback to get him snaps, but like you said, they're very creative. Found a bunch of different ways to get him the ball. He definitely looked like he was going to pass. Like the second play, he was out there running a play. So, at minimum, they're throwing a bunch of stuff out there for teams to have to prepare for, so they can't just lock in on one thing. So I do like that about that package. I have no doubt that at some point this year he's going to bust a long touchdown or two. Will it be against a high-end team or Murray State? That's yet to be decided, but it will happen at some point. I do believe that.
Yep. Well, and I had this, and I'll probably do a story on it eventually for the news, but I mean, Olson, he told me that, they did an evaluation of who are our top 10 players. And he's like, our number 2 quarterback is in the top 10. That doesn't happen. I mean, it's just, he's one of our top athletes. So they have to, I mean, I think that's the thing. So it'll be curious, but I think the next thing we got to move on. And I think, I thought maybe it would be the USD game because obviously I thought they kind of played where we expected. But yeah, I think the big talker right now is certainly Montana UND.
Well,
and
Ron's a Montana State fan, so he's loving the hell out of this.
I can't say. Well, I mean, I don't want to say they play so well in that tinfoil dome. It's not even. First of all, you don't have to put up the rant clock. I'm not going to go on a rant about it, but neither of those facilities are domes. They're like airplane hangars. I've been in both. I worked up there. Fargo Dome's not a dome. It's not a dome is round. A dome is what they have in Vermilion and in Cedar Falls. Say what you want about the Dakota Dome, but at least it's round. That is a dome. The Fargo Dome is not a dome. It's a box. It's an airplane hangar. The Alaris Center, at least they call it a center. It's like a tinfoil thing. But UND always plays. I think CSU is one of the only teams to win up there along with Sac State last year in the playoffs. So yeah, they always play well up in there. So it's a tough place, but I really didn't know. I don't know. I mean, and I don't want to get too bullish on this Montana loss because we saw them lose last year to a really bad Northern Arizona team early in the season. And then look what they did the rest of the way. But the one thing I was like, I didn't know about last week, granted they were playing Iowa State, who did come out today and win at Iowa after losing most of the game, ended up getting a big comeback. But, UND looked good defensively, I thought, last week at Iowa State. But offensively, I'm like, well, what is this team doing? Because they just didn't. I mean, they lost Schuster, who was kind of a bit of a lightning rod anyway. I don't think anybody – I think he's one of those guys that either you loved him or you hated him or he probably got too much blame or too little credit. One of those two. He's kind of the middle guy. But for them to get 27 points, I didn't know that they could put up that many points to beat Montana, quite frankly. And they did. So, I mean, I think you have to look at UND and say I'm not going to say they're a factor in the Valley race, but to me, they're right back in the playoff discussion where I didn't necessarily know if they would be in the playoff discussion.
Yeah, I think this does put them right in the playoff discussion. When I looked at this game at the beginning of the season, I did not expect them to win it, but as I looked at it more and more, and then we talked about it on Scared Money Don't Make Money, and Montana fans were all over us. How can you be picking UND? How can you be picking UND? Well, there's a couple things we know is true. Number one, If Montana doesn't have their starter from the year prior, it takes them 4 to 5 weeks to figure out who they actually want their starter to be before they can actually get their offense running. Number 2, UND plays way better in the shed. And number 3, that quarterback inefficiency in the beginning of the year for Montana causes them to get losses they shouldn't early in the year. So it was kind of a perfect storm there. And I do wonder if Bobby Hauck is a little bit like Kirk Ferentz, where he's so defensive-minded that it affects what happens on the offensive side of the ball before they've, in ways of decision making and what he wants, and it's just not a strong suit. But he is in control of his program, so they go with what he wants to do first, and then it ends up not working out, and they figure it out from there. I wonder if that's a little bit of it. That's way outside looking in from way over on the other side of the plains. But yeah, I think this was one that you're able to see coming. I mean, after Montana struggled with Missouri State at home, going on the road to the Lara Center, which I believe they lost their last time they played too. And I mean, against a UND team that their defense performed, I think, real well against Iowa State, considering their offense only put up 3 points. They still held them 21 points. It was like, man, struggling offense going in against a team whose defense has at least started out pretty good. I really thought that game was over, though. I really felt strongly that UND was going to at least make it close and beat the spread. And then the first half, it's like 24-0 or whatever it was. We're getting updates in the stands. I'm like, well, that's over. All of a sudden, I looked down at my phone. Sam Herder's like, yeah, UND just scored twice in the last 3 minutes, and they're down 21-24. It's like, oh, okay. And then started paying attention, and yeah, they came right back. It was wild. The whole FCS was wild today. St. Francis got an FBS win. Southern Utah got an FBS win. Now, a lot of people who follow the subdivision nationally very, very closely have been pegging them as a team that will be on the rise. But still, Southern Utah won an FBS game, and then the Fighting X go out and win an FBS game with their starting quarterback from the game before with a broken collarbone. Like, this whole day has been wild, to say the least. So it shouldn't have been a surprise, I guess, that they came back from that huge deficit at home.
I will say, and obviously I didn't follow UND as closely. Like I will say I think the reception for the phone, maybe they've gotten better with the cell towers or the cell reception.
I was told they added 2 extra cell towers there.
Okay, because I used to never be able to get anything down on the field, which drove me nuts because I'm trying to follow other games, obviously, and I didn't. But like some of the numbers, as I'm just looking at this thing, I'll have to go back and scroll. But like, for one thing, I've been warned that UND probably would not be a good passing team. One of their guys who was projected to be a quarterback ended up transferring. I think he was actually the son of a former NDSU guy. I think he was he transferred. Okay, so Simon Romfo, I might be mispronouncing that. 11 of 24 for 97 yards and a pick, and they won with that. And you have Bo Belquist on your team. Bo Belquist had 4 catches for 33 yards. I mean, that kid is going to be like, he's one of the best receivers in this conference, and he's going to be lucky if he has, at this pace, he'll be lucky if he has 500 yards for the season. I mean, good God. I mean, I guess he ran. Now, the guy did run for 7 carries for 57 yards and a touchdown. Z-Bar, I mean, offensively, they didn't put anything together that's like going to wow you. They did run for 243 yards. Z-Bar, 20. I mean, I remember he was big last year against the Bison. 22 for 88. Didn't have a 100-yard rusher. I'm a little curious about what Montana was doing. Gilman only had 8 carries for 88 yards, which, I mean, maybe he got hurt. I don't know. That's still a 10-yard average. Why aren't you giving him the ball more especially when you're up 20, when you get out to a 20-point lead? Nick Osmo was kind of their bigger back. I mean, he had 8 for 45. He's averaging nearly 5. Why are you only giving these guys 8 yards? I haven't followed them that closely, even though I did work out there. Yeah, Trey Feeney, that was the name, and yeah, I remember his dad. I don't know if his dad was the Feeney, was the NDSU. Yeah, I guess it was. I know his dad actually was a pretty good coach as well too in the area. But yeah, I mean, excuse me, I know the quarterback they had for Montana in this game is that Ayat. We saw him a little bit last year at the end of the championship game. They brought him in kind of when the thing was out of reach, but that's another legacy guy at Montana. His dad, I think, won their first national title. I thought they had a transfer from the FBS. I don't know if that guy got hurt or washed out or what. So yeah, like you said, but you said you hit the nail on the head there. They kind of always need a while to figure out what their quarterback situation is. And I saw somebody else said it here too, and it kind of echoed what I said about SDSU. It's only game 2. People are still figuring themselves out. And again, I remember the Northern Arizona loss last year. We were all saying, oh boy, Bobby's going to lose it. And, they ended up not losing another game until they played SDSU. And, they still ended up being, I still think they gave SDSU a pretty good game last year, but until they kind of ran out of gas in the second half and SDSU kind of pulled away from them. So, I mean, it's really, and stats don't tell the whole thing, but I mean, goodness, these are just, yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird. It's just a little weird looking at these numbers and seeing that North Dakota won this game. But we'll see. I mean, some of this, but defense can travel. I think they're gonna, but I do think North Dakota's gonna have to find a little more offense. I mean, I don't know how you. I know the Valley is a defensively. I don't know how you pass for how you get away with passing for less than 100 yards a game and win in the Missouri Valley. It's especially when you're an indoor team. I mean, if this were the old days and they were playing at Memorial Stadium and when it's going to be 40 below in December, sure, great, yeah, Mark Gronowski's arm will freeze and be like that playoff game a year ago where everybody will get hypothermia and die. But I don't know that it's gonna. I think you do have to have a little bit of a forward pass to your offense. So I don't know. Yeah, but yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, some of these I haven't even seen half. Again, I've been just running around as usual. But yeah, I think it's big for the FCS though. We had, because that was one of the headlines last week, was that FCS wasn't really competitive in a lot of their games, and it turned around this week. Certainly, you get a few, as you like to say, scalps, and there were even some games that, even though they didn't win, there were more competitive games in general. And I really want to dig into this one because I've seen this one mentioned too. Good God, what is going on with Eastern Washington? I mean, I don't know if that guy's still on here or not, but I just that to me is I just, the red turf, the Inferno. I mean, and they may not even have. I know somebody's mentioned this, and I know that's been an issue. I mean, the funding there is going downhill. I don't know if they'll ever cut that program, but they might. I mean, it's.
What I've heard, who people closer to that program, that is just Eastern Washington has a certain couple professors who try to run that up the flagpole every year and try to cause a issue with.
You kind of have that, I guess.
Funding's just going to go into their project, but yeah, the precipitous fall of them is breathtaking. How they just fell off a cliff. I mean, yeah, just Brian and I were talking at the Jacks game. It was just like 3 years ago they were contending for the Big Sky Conference title, and now you're losing to Drake. You're losing, and yeah, it's early season, like we've been talking, but you can't be losing to Drake. You can't be losing to a Scully school.
They had some of the best talent in the entire subdivision. They had, they had a Super Bowl MVP just 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever it was now. I mean, Vernon Adams was one of the most coveted transfers right before the portal became a thing. I remember that playoff game SDSU played out there not long ago. It was 10 years ago now, I guess, 11 years, whatever it is now. I guess the other one that came, that program, they just haven't been the same since Bo Baldwin left. That was, and I don't know that Bo Baldwin's been the same since he left. Unfortunately, I think he left to Cal, I think, to be their offensive coordinator, and then that fell apart. I think that whole staff got fired. I got to Google where Bo Baldwin, because I know he went out to Cal Poly, and then they were god awful. I remember USD just killed a couple of teams that USD wasn't even particularly great with, but USD went out there and just killed them a couple times. And then, Bo Baldwin won Bo Baldwin was 85-32 from 2008 to 16 out there. Leaves to take. I'm trying to see what his career track was. He went to
Patrick
Cal.
Says he went to Cal.
Yeah, went to Cal. He was there from 2017 to 19. I think that staff got blown out, and now he's says he's with the Calgary Stampede. So now he's in the CFL. So he was with Cal Poly as the head coach from 21 to 22, and at Cal Poly he went 4-21. So, neither of those. I guess somebody asked if who would replace him. Maybe they go back to. Do you ask Bo Baldwin to come back? Do you both say, hey, this hasn't gone well for either of us. Let's do a reunion here and see if we can find the old magic. I don't know. It's sad. It'd be for the best for the subdivision. You need good teams, and that's one of those things that I don't know. I don't know how that program comes back. But they had a great rivalry with Montana, great rivalry with Montana State. I don't know what to do now. And of course, that red turf had kind of built its own iconic thing. They called it the Inferno. And they're in that Spokane area. It's a big area. It's not like there's not talent. Gosh, I just don't know. But that was the down part for the Big Sky. The up part, I would imagine, has to be the Fighting X. Jason, and I like this one because I dislike Wyoming. So I will cheer Jason anytime, but I will cheer him anytime he beats Wyoming. Although that's kind of been somewhat typical. I know Wyoming's had a couple of FCS losses before. Here's a name from the past too that some will recognize. Nate Thomas was their leading rusher, 64 yards on 15 carries. They had another guy who had 52 yards. So they had a little bit of a dual threat running. And then the Wagner kid, nothing spectacular, 12-21 for $101. Wyoming's kind of starting over. I've kind of heard that was I kind of thought that was a gettable one, especially after they played well at Oregon. But it's nice to see Nate Thomas getting another shot. I think that he kind of got supplanted, which I don't know what happened with him at USD, but you certainly can't really doubt what they had because that Charles Pierre kid's been phenomenal for him. But and the Tice kid's a good runner, but yeah, it's looks like Nate Thomas has definitely found a second life at Idaho. And yeah,
I'm sure Heck didn't forget him.
And yeah, like they said, the interesting thing with Idaho is they played good defense. Like I said, Wyoming is starting over. They're 0-2 now. Wyoming lost. I think they lost to Arizona. Yeah, they got killed at Arizona State the week before. But Idaho played good defense at Oregon. They played pretty good defense against two FBS teams. That's not exactly what you think of when you think of the Big Sky. I think this is a team that. We've said they're coming. They kind of maybe underachieved a little bit in the playoffs.
There's a beastly stat line for 2 FBS games in a row for a player.
But, I've always said this about FBS games. They don't necessarily end it. We put way too much stock in them because they never end up saying the full story about what your season's going to be. They just get you either too hyped or too – if you win them, they get you too hyped up a lot of the times. They it's just a different deal when you get into playing it. So, yeah. So, yeah, but yeah, we love Jason. Jason is the dude. Yeah, God. Well, I guess we can hit on it briefly here before we get going. Obviously, touched on USD. I think that kind of went how we all expected it. Well, I don't want to say how it went. I did not expect them to come back from being down 14-0 because I think a lot of people probably saw that. I'm sure even Coyote fans were even thinking, "Oh, it's same old. Here we go again." Because I thought they were going to compete in that game and be a 4-quarter game, but when I saw them get down 14-0 right away, I thought, well, it's just going to spiral and be another. So I think maybe that's again, as I just said, I don't think you can take, and I said this with SDSU last week, I don't think you want to take too much, you want to be too critical or get too excited about the good or the bad that comes out of an FBS game. But, I just remember how bad when things started getting bad for them against SDSU last year or NDSU in that playoff game, it really snowballed downhill. I think that's, and we'll see. Maybe Wisconsin, we don't think Wisconsin's that good. And maybe at the end of the year, Wisconsin doesn't end up being better than the top teams in the Valley. But I think it's a good sign that they were able to kind of compose themselves and keep themselves in that game and give themselves a shot, especially in that atmosphere, because it gets loud. I don't care how good they are. That's one of the louder, tougher places to play.
Yeah.
Especially if you're an FCS team that doesn't go there. I think that's maybe the biggest takeaway I'll have from that. I would be more encouraged about that than anything. And even if, I'd be more encouraged about that than I would have been if you told me it was a 4-quarter game previously. It's like for them to get down 14-0 and actually as disastrous a start that was, that would give me, because as some of those games they had a year ago when they did lose, it just got so bad when the train got off the tracks. But at the same time too, they have a more experienced team. You do kind of expect that they're going to be able to right the ship. So we'll see. They have a game next week at Portland State, which they'd better not. That's one you don't want to. That's one you could also overlook as well. You don't want to go up there and assume you have that one in the win column because that could. But a very good. I think a good. Like I said, they checked the box that I wanted to see them check as a top 5, top 10 team. At least go up there and compete, and they certainly did.
Yeah, although I called this.
I know it was painful for you to call, but
yeah. Well, I'm just glad they didn't win. Growing up in Wisconsin, always went to Badgers games and all that jazz. So that would have hurt me a little bit extra. But
I heard this on the broadcast as I was driving up to Brookings when they played, because they played there in 2011. And I think Dante Warren was the USD quarterback, but that 2011 team for Wisconsin, that was the Big Ten championship team they had. That roster that Wisconsin had, and they beat the Coyotes 59-10, no shock. But that was Russell Wilson, Melvin Gordon, Monty Ball, James White. That roster was insane. That was probably, that might have been the greatest Wisconsin team of all time. I can't believe US. That was, well, maybe not, but it has to be one of the great. Didn't they win the Rose Bowl?
Was that the team with Russell Wilson?
That was.
Oh, okay, then maybe. Yeah.
That was Russell Wilson, Melvin Gordon. The backfield had Melvin Gordon, Monty Ball, and James White. That's insanity. That has to be one of, if not the greatest teams in Wisconsin history. Good Lord. That was, and no shock they beat USD 59-10, but I'm like, little different 13 years later.
Yeah. Good God. That was the Wisconsin team that was like 2 Hail Marys away from that win against them from possibly playing for a national title.
Yeah. I will say the one thing I want to see from USD, and even their fans were kind of echoing this when I was going back and forth. They got to open it up a little more. I was just, and you mentioned the Steph Logan's kid. That and this was the prime example I had. They get down the touchdown, 7-0, and they come out on their first play. They hit Tice for a 25-yard gain. So good start right away. And then their second play is a 4-yard pass. So you got a 2nd and 6. It's a manageable, you're manageable right there. They just do like 2 vanilla runs and then they punt. And, it's been one of the things we talked about. I know it's been talked about down there as well. We're going to be more explosive. We know, this is second year in Josh Davis' system. These guys are all experienced now. And it's just, they didn't really take a whole lot of chance. That's the one thing I liked about SDSU the week before. Although, to be fair, SDSU kind of had a very conservative plan against Oklahoma State in the first half. But same time, they had a lot of new personnel on their offense in the first half. And then they opened it up in the second half. The thing with USD is, okay, you guys got to take the training wheels off here. They kind of did a little bit in the second half, but still, you have enough offensive talent on that team, and Bauman has enough. You just gotta, and the defense held them in that game long enough. Their defense is still pretty good. It's like obviously they've got some more composure. They just can't keep doing this. They're just, my thing for them is I could see it falling apart with them where they're just too conservative. Because I feel like with SDSU, they're still, SDSU is, I feel like SDSU will take those chances. I just don't know that USD does yet. And that would drive me nuts because I feel like they do have the talent. I just don't know if they're not going to, I don't know if they're going to pull the trigger at times. Because, this was a situation today where you have nothing to lose. Nobody expects you to go into Wisconsin and win. You're hanging with them. Just some of the, that's kind of the one thing where I'm like, they've said they're going to open this playbook up. They're going to be more explosive. Okay, better start showing it. So we'll see. Like I said, can't judge. Don't take too much from it, but they got to take the training wheels off once they get to conference play. Or you waste a really good defense again. But I think that's just about it for the FCS. What do we got? Probably won't have too much to talk about next week with I don't want to disrespect Augie. I do like Jerry Shesky. He's one of my favorite. Yep, you're good. Oh, muted Brendan. Might have the little one having a little problem here, but or he's got to tend to the little one, I should say. But we'll be wrapping up here pretty soon. I don't think they're a fringe top 16 team, but we'll see. I think they're pretty good. We'll see. No, market predictions way too early. Very, very, very early. No, I think I guess we start looking ahead to next week. Obviously, expecting SDSU to probably win that one fairly handily. Don't want to disrespect Augustana, though. I like Jerry Shefsky. He's a very good coach. Like I said, they're going to – I think I'm going to pull up next week's schedule before we take
Ron, you just played Maine and – God, I don't remember who you played last week. Somebody softer than Sharman. Shut up.
It was Utah Tech. Utah Tech. Okay, well, I'm pulling up the schedules for next week. So.
Let's pull up your out of conference top 25 teams you've scheduled, Ron.
Well, I guess you guys are off next week, so no Montana. Montana, by the way, has Morehead State, so hopefully that's hopefully they don't get bit by the out by the Pioneer League next week. But yeah.
Oh God, the internet would melt down.
Missoula might not survive that. It's obviously it's in Washington Grizzly, but I can tell you one of the games I'll melt down. You might again, as I've said, I've got all the respect in the world for Jerry Shefsky and Augustana. Not expecting that to be a particularly close game. This place might melt down if it's a particularly close game. The wide-eyed look on your face will be the look on your face the whole show.
Oh, and again, God, I'd have to mute the comments.
And again, this is all due respect to Jerry. I don't think he's watching because he's probably not up this late. Ron, everybody beats New Mexico. My alma mater sucks, and we beat New Mexico. CSU beats New Mexico pretty regularly, and we've had a bad decade or three. But yeah, I think. And by the way, Augustana, they won at the University of Mary, but everybody wins at Mary in the NSIC. But yeah, I think at least I think Augustana's got a good chance to win the NSIC. So you're getting at least it's probably a better Division II team. And I'm not just saying this as a homer. It's probably a better Division II team than Western Oregon. So from that regard, at least you're not playing a total. You're not playing somebody who's just not serious about football I want to ask Jimmy, but if they have to play these games, I would prefer they keep them in state or in region. Play the Augies, play the Northerns, play USF. Play, I think, Thayer, Trent Ales, Black Hills State. I'd rather help the in-state programs than go Western Oregon and some other doofus program that I've never heard of. But yeah, that's so not probably not going to be probably will not be as competitive as tonight, more than likely. The rest of the Valley slate, North Dakota has Idaho State next week at 1. We mentioned USD; they go to Portland State. Little potential for a trap there. Portland State is 0-2, and they have not been very good the last couple of years. They lost at Washington State 70-30. Granted, Washington State's not bad, and lost at Weber State 43-16. But it's a home opener. I mean, it's a weird game. It's a 3:00 game, so like I said, as long as USD takes them seriously, I think they should win that. North Dakota State, East Tennessee, I believe they're a SoCon, right?
East Tennessee State is, they're SoCon.
Okay. Just want to double check. Interesting that they're going out to East Tennessee State. They play on the road there. Like I said, at William B. Green Jr. Stadium in Johnson, Tennessee. So
it's actually a cool little stadium.
Yeah, I know. I've seen that one. I'm kind of fascinated. They agreed to that. Usually they want to play I remember they played at Towson once, but usually they don't like to play those kind of games at the smaller, unless it's like a bigger venue or something. So yeah, I think that'll be again, I would love it if they somehow found a way to lose that game, but Lord knows our friends over at Fans Nation would love that. But we'll see what happens there. It's just a kind of a quirky road game for them to play. So we'll see what happens. This is no longer a conference game anymore. Western Illinois is at Illinois State.
Yep.
Western Illinois still hasn't won a game, though, so some things don't change. Duquesne's at Youngstown. Dayton's at Indiana State. Linden Woods at Missouri State. Missouri State had another high-scoring game. They lost at Ball State today, 42-34. I think basically every point in that was scored like in the fourth quarter. Murray State, you mentioned they lost to Butler. They got Mississippi Valley State at home next week. We'll see if they can get a win. The Word, by the way, heads to Southern Illinois next week. So that could be a very high-scoring game up there. I mean, those teams both 1-1. So, and we didn't even touch on this. It's funny as hell. It almost happened. Northern Iowa goes to St. Thomas. Speaking of our in-state NSIC teams.
Yes.
St. Thomas got waxed in week 1 by Sioux Falls, 34-13, and probably could have been even worse than that. And St. Thomas pretty much led that entire game today against UNI. Panthers rallied late and held on at the end to win 17-10 in St. Paul. I think that's the first time St. Thomas has actually hosted an FCS a scholarship team there. So the Panthers are 2-0. They got one out. And now next week they go to Nebraska, who, by the way, just took down Dion's team. And if you want to see the most entertainment next week might be watching me as I'm reacting to CSU CU in Fort Collins.
Yeah, watch Zach's Twitter feed.
Yeah, that will be. Well, I'll be kind of at Brookings too at the same time, so I don't know if I'll be able to maybe stream it on my phone or what. But we'd better win. Well, I don't have that much to complain about football, and my favorite pro team is basically gods among men in this sport. But I just want this one so bad, so bad. I just cannot really can't tell you how bad I want this one. Not really confident they're going to get it, but no. Yeah, we'll see. I wouldn't have that much faith in Prime if I were you guys, but it's in Fort Collins. Like I said, I know nobody knows the history like me, but they have not played the Buffaloes in Fort Collins in 30 some years. So they have waited for this game. And the last time was 96. So it's either been at Mile High or it's been in Boulder. And I don't know if the way college is shifting around. Who knows if they're ever going to play it again at this pace, and much less in Fort Collins. And I'm sure there'll be a decent amount of Buffalo fans too. There's always a section but I want that. If I could have, I would have gone to this game. I'm sure the ticket would have been a couple $1,000. This is one we've dreamed about for a long time. I wish the program were in better shape. But I hope the place is a hornet's nest. And CSU was not overly impressive. I think they beat Northern Colorado 38-17. I would have liked to see them being like 50-10, but whatever. It's going to be on CBS nationally. I don't know. I don't care what happens the rest of the year. I just want this. Just win this fudging game, and they could go 2-10, and I don't care. I just want this one. Just this one. Give it to me. So on that note,
we're all pulling for you.
Or you'll see my misery. So either way, you guys win. And like I said, you'll beat Augustana next week. So
I sure hope so. And on that note, when I was up in Brookings, our segment sponsor is Blue Tide Car Wash. I saw a ton of cars getting their cars washed in Blue Tide before the game. So I'm assuming that some of our listeners that were getting their car all nice and shiny for the tailgate lots. I did not do that. I was covered in dirt. I should have, but I was behind. So I wasn't able to stop and get the truck all nice and shiny clean, but I will be doing that tomorrow. If you do want to go to Blue Tide Car Wash, they've got a bunch of tunnel. They've got multiple tunnel locations in Sioux Falls. They've got one in Brookings. They're putting one in Mitchell. They also have a bunch of gas station automatic touchless car washes and brushed car washes as well for all good and go locations in Sioux Falls area. And you can get a monthly pass for one of their highest packages for like $35. And you do that 2-3 times, it's paid for itself. I live on a dirt road. I use it probably once or twice a week because I can, and it's going to make your car last a lot longer as well, especially once winter comes around and start getting salt on your vehicles. So head on down to Blue Tide Car Wash. They are the place to get your car washed in the southeast South Dakota region.
all right, very good. Yeah, and not to mention, I think you got when it gets windy out there. They're turfing the fields now at the baseball stadium, so
yeah,
kick up even more dust when it starts getting windy out there.
Yeah, won't be getting sandblasted at that field anymore in the eyes when the wind's blowing out of the northwest of the softball
I
field.
still have sand in that camera from that freaking it wasn't the Summit League tournament, but it was I can't remember if I think it was a USD game or whichever one it was this year.
Yes.
Well, South Dakota and wind, whatever. But I think that'll do it for this late night because it's been extremely late thanks to that game being a little bit of a barn burner. We'll see about next week. Hopefully the interstate's a little. I think, like I said, be a little fun next week. Obviously, there'll be a few few Augie fans up, so you'll rekindle some old memories for you. NCC, for those of you who have NCC memories. By the way, I wanted to ask, did they do anything with Matt Anderson? I didn't notice if they had like a little in-stadium thing, or I know they had that video online.
Yeah, I don't know if I remember seeing a tribute video in the stadium, but maybe that played before I got in the stadium as well.
I was just saying, maybe I was impressed. Everybody was in their seats like 15 minutes, 20 minutes before the game. I was like, this is the earliest I've ever seen everybody in there. I thought maybe there would be a little more of a pregame thing. It was just basically Jack holding the trophies, which is fine. And like I said, kind of like they changed up the whole, kind of like that new little thing they had to the machine deal. But I was kind of wondering if there was gonna be more of a Matt Anderson thing because they had that nice video online. But like I said, either we missed that or, and obviously they have the decals anyways on the helmet, which are cool. Yep. So, but yeah, that was pretty. I saw that when I woke up this morning. And I didn't know the guy. I know I was at that Dakota Marker game covering it from Fargo, and I think I saw him holding that. But that was, like I said, you don't even have to be a fan or have played with him for that to hit you pretty hard. So I think that's probably a good note to end on. Just thoughts and prayers with that family. That one hit me pretty hard when I saw that this morning, and I didn't know the guy. So, but anyways, hope you all enjoyed the game, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thanks for joining us.